As part of our ongoing conversation series with Jordan Digital Marketing, I'm here again for part two of our conversation with Patrick Moorhead, one of the leaders at AI Trust Signals. And we're going to be talking a little bit about AI search results and things like that, and the general state of things in the AEO world, and some of the contrasting truths between AEO and SEO. So thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. And to kick things off, I just want to sort of ask, like, when we talk about AEO and getting citations and getting noticed, one of the things that always sticks out to me is, like, how do you get introduced? How do you focus on that first introduction? Like, in SEO, there was always sort of a way that you could focus on top of funnel SEO traffic versus middle and bottom of funnel. How do you control your content and your strategy for, the first interaction to get into conversations so that you can have, good quality answers for those follow-up questions? In AI?
That's a great question. I'm not sure there's one right answer for that, but I think the answer is one of those obvious ones when I say it out loud, which is you've got to position your brand content in a way that makes it make sense for AI to include it in the answer that it's giving to its user. And so how do you do that? Let's start from the position that AI's goal is not necessarily empirical factual truth. AI's goal with its user is to make its user happy and to attempt to give its user what it thinks its user wants. Its next goal is to do that as efficiently and as low risk way as possible. Okay? And so that's kind of the landscape that AI is looking at the world through. So when you think about your content, the starting point is understand how AI is going to go look for information, understand how your buyer is going to ask for that information from AI, and then find a way to position your content so that it's obvious and low risk for AI to trust you and provide your content through to its user, right? So that sounds complicated, but here's what I mean, right? Nothing has changed fundamentally since the early days of SEO when it comes to understanding what buyers need when they're searching and shopping for your product. And the more effective you can get at understanding what buyers really ask for and really search for when they're searching for your category, the better you're going to do in search and in AI search, right? The nuance is, I think in AI, then it's about how do you respond to that? And what we're finding it with AI is that titling content in a way that very closely resembles that more semantic buyer question that's going to get asked in AI is one way to do it. So if I want to buy a pair of headphones, right? I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type keywords, best headphones, right? Or best noise canceling headphones, whatever it is. If you think about the way that people use AI, they're not going to just type that. They're gonna talk to it, right? They're gonna say, I want a pair of headphones that does X, Y, and Z, and that doesn't cost this much, and fits a certain way, or is compatible with my device. And can you help me figure out the 2 or 3 best ones for that, based on what I'm saying, right? So it's a paragraph versus four keywords, and your content opportunity is inside that paragraph to develop an article that answers that question and is titled to match the way that the user is prompting that question into AI. So your article title is literally going to be, what are the best headphones for Samsung users that prefer noise cancellation and cost isn't a factor? It seems long, and a classic SEO person would look at that blog title and they'd be like, oh my God, like that's a nightmare. But that's exactly what AI wants, because it's going to have its user asking a question like that, and its first move is going to be go find content that seems to semantically sort of match what this person is asking. Because if I find content that matches that semantically, it's very likely that that content's going to answer that question.
I think that's yeah.
Go ahead. I mean, the only thing I was going to say is, like, then the whole checklist about AEO content optimization kicks in, where it's like so title as a question, try to get that question to semantically resemble the prompt that your buyer's going to ask. Your next move is bottom line up front. So answer that question right away, immediately after the blog title, right? Answering that question directly, factually, and with data to back it up if you possibly can. And then build the rest of your story down, chunk it out in a way that you understand the AI is going to read from the top of your page down. It's probably only going to get about 30% of the way through it before it gives up and says, I'm done with this source. And your job is to sort of compress the entire answer to that buyer question up into the top 30% of your piece. That doesn't mean the piece can't be longer, because you got to write for humans too, right? But I think that, and that's not a silver bullet either, but that gives you a picture of the strategy.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I was gonna address was what you just sort of addressed is like building chunkable content within pages versus, having a page with a title that specifically answers the question. How do you see those two things in terms of what is most important? Like, I know FAQs and things like a lot of people would maybe put those sort of things on an FAQs page that doesn't maybe answer the question in the title. Like, how impactful do you think different elements within that sort of structure are? Title page versus just putting it as an H1 or H2.
I think the jury's out on that. What I do feel highly confident about is that AI doesn't read your entire blog post. And your chances for citation are greatly improved if you give the AI search an entry point that closely resembles what its user is looking for semantically. And then you give it as much kind of concrete, plain and simple, factual, bottom line up front information as you can in the first 30%. I'm not sure that AI search is caring that much actually about H1 versus H2, and a lot of that stuff from SEO, I don't think it matters terribly much. This falls into the same topic bucket as schema, where like I think there's a huge debate in schema where it's like you have one camp that's sort of saying, potentially my camp, right, the AI trust signals camp, that's saying like advanced schema, you got to put it all over everything. Don't inject schema into your page, have it server-side rendered or in the code, right? And then you have the other side of that debate, which is sort of like schema doesn't matter because AI doesn't care the difference between code text and on-page text or whatever it is. And I think the reality is schema in and of itself is not a silver bullet to get recommended by AI, but it's another lever that you have to make your content accessible. Now, that being said, if you didn't do what we just talked about before, which is set yourself up for answer-focused semantic structure, answer in a bottom line upfront way, structure the answer with data, keep it clean and simple, don't use narrative, flourish, and all this kind of stuff doesn't matter. And you put schema around it so that it's structured in a machine readable way as well, that's your best chance.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think like the other thing that we use a lot is just like actually once you have, profound reporting on your individual like query fan outs, then start using that to check out your different answers for what is being searched behind the scenes, because what ends up happening is like there's this long paragraph long prompt that then turns into, dozens of searches. And if you can go figure out what those actual searches are and get to the sort of like route that AI is using to surface the information back to that original query or that original prompt, that's one of the things that we've been able to do to help us understand and optimize around sort of like top, middle, bottom of funnel is just sort of looking at the categories that you want to show up for. And then there's a little bit of like, you just got to determine sort of where things are. And then we really try to focus on a lot of like top of funnel stuff in that way, just to make sure that we're showing up in that first interaction. Then once those conversations get going, you're in the consideration set early on. And I think that's been really impactful for how we think about the difference between AI search and traditional search.
Yeah, and look, it's easy to forget that the big reason that I will die on the hill that AEO is different than SEO is very simple. SEO is deterministic. It is, these are the keywords, these are the volumes in search, these are the link webs around the topics, right? And it's all very, very deterministic. AI search is probabilistic. And you could run the same query 4 times in one LLM or 3 times in 3 different LLMs, and you're going to get slightly different answers every time.
Yeah.
So there's no deterministic way to do this. You have to, and this is what I wrote about when I wrote Answer Rank, right? Where the difference is AI search is like your brand is a leaf on a stream, right? And so when you throw the leaf on the stream is AI search. You have no way to predict where the leaf is going to wind up. It could flow, it could hit the bank in 2 feet later, it could sink, it could flow around a rock, it could wind up in the Pacific Ocean when you drop it in the water in Aspen, Colorado, right? Like that's what understanding probabilistic search is. And it just causes you to have a mindset shift because you're not going to say you're selling the noise canceling headphones. You're not gonna earn your AI recommendation place with one piece of content. the likelihood of you earning your recommendation in all the AI models with one conclusive, all-encompassing piece of content about, the buyer's guide to noise canceling headphones and hitting all those AEO notes that I talked about, not forgetting your SEO notes as well, right? It just won't happen. So instead, I think you've got to start thinking in terms of writing crisper, shorter, more precise content for more buyer need states. So I'm looking for noise canceling headphones in this price range, and I have a Samsung, and we should talk about that and how our product lives there. I don't care about budget, and I have an iPhone. Or I care mostly about how the headphones fit, and then if they have noise canceling and they're not super expensive, I'll buy those. And those are 3 different pieces of content that each have their own probability for matching a prompt set that's coming out of a user session in AI. And you should have all 3.
Yeah. No, and I think it's a really interesting distinction moving from like a search engine result page with a list of links versus just this open stream of prompts, and you have to sort of generally direct your ship towards the direction you want to be headed in, but it's not as clear. There's not as clear of a destination as there used to be. And so like that leads to a lot more nuance and a lot more changes that you need to make in content that you otherwise didn't even necessarily make, because if you got to the first page, that was a win, and you get X amount more traffic, and now it's like a lot less clear. You know what I mean? What good looks like is a lot of different things to a lot of different brands.
Right.
And I think that's what's really interesting. And I think you touched on something else, which is like SEO versus AEO. How much of SEO is how much of AEO is just SEO? And I think the way I always think about it is they sort of share a lot of like the root, systems, but have like very different recipes for success. And I think like one of the things that I always tell people is you sort of need to consider both at the same time, because a good SEO program is also a good foundation for a good AEO program, and vice versa. And to focus on one and not the other, especially right now where, we talked last time, like Google still makes up the lion's share of search, even though AI is eating into that at an extremely rapid rate. But like, you still have to consider both. But how much do you think SEO versus AEO differ, and where do you think those big differences are, and how do you think brands should think about it?
Yeah. I mean, one of the most obvious ways, Tyler, that I can answer that question is you and I have seen many, many clients over the years that have been phenomenally successful in organic search and had little to no digital PR programs, right? Meaning they had no concerted effort to drive third-party media references. They were not doing executive interviews. They weren't chasing source status for tier 1 publications. They don't have a strategy for how they're on Reddit. And they are still driving tons of funnel volume off of organic search because their branded content that they publish on their website is SEO'd to perfection. Mm-hmm. And they're nailing it from a content, a pillar content point of view, where they're tuned in to how buyers want to shop. They're building content that meets the buyer where the buyer is when they're searching, and they're crushing it. That is still true in AEO. However, you look at top cited sources in ChatGPT, for example, and it's Reddit and it's YouTube. And the more you're sort of used as an expert source in the Wall Street Journal or Fortune magazine or Wired magazine, that now has arguably an equal or maybe greater influence on how your brand ultimately appears inside AI Answers than your own site content. And that stuff has never been a part of SEO. I think people are claiming.
I would argue that it's sort of like was, but by a different name. So it was like sort of like domain authority was the way that you would determine whether a site was trustworthy or not. And that's sort of like you're built by your brand mentions now. And it's just like link building versus like digital PR. I think personally, the way that things are trending with AI is like a better model for determining like brand trustworthiness than the older model. But I do think it is sort of just an iteration of what was baked into SEO, but like it's sort of like everything, internet in the US early on was all built on copper wires. And so like we laid all these copper wires and everybody kept trying to figure out the best way to make this work. But like the reality is like once you just moved away from the old infrastructure, it was a much better system. I think that's sort of like the transition we're making going from SEO to AEO is righting some of the wrongs of having to build on those like old copper wires. But like I think they're both trying to accomplish the same end, but to your point, like
well, and I don't think they're
it's a
at
little
war
bit
with
different.
each other, right? I mean, they're different. I think they're fundamentally different genres of exercise. You're not going to not want an authoritative domain for Google search ranking, and people still use Google like crazy. Come on, right? But again, like domain authority is a deterministic measure in that it attempts to say this domain is authoritative because it's linked to by this many sources and those have this credibility and blah, 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 et cetera, right? In AI search, I think it's very likely that you could have an absolute disaster of domain authority and search engine ranking, but be constantly put forward by AI as an expert because you had a feature article in Fortune magazine where you were called out as the expert and they quoted you 3 times and listed your degree and resumes, right? And so you're forever going to be the expert in ChatGPT. And if I go to your website, it's like it doesn't have domain authority. And you don't have any search mechanics going on your website, right? I think that's true, and that highlights the difference.
Yeah, I think they're both intended to try and like show a way that something is trustworthy versus not trustworthy, and just like blowing up the old model and going forward with a new model is like allowed it to be better at actually determining trustworthiness of a brand, you know? But they're both sort of like different flavors of what we're trying to do the same function. I think it's really interesting to watch, you know, AI just get to do it right from the start. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways. I mean, I think it's generally been a little bit harder to game the system, whereas like, especially in the early days of SEO, it was really easy to game the system, which has allowed it to be, you know, more trustworthy. And I think to your point you mentioned earlier, if AI is trying to make the end user happy as its main goal, right? Like, it has to do those things, and it has to do those things quickly and determine like what is trustworthy and what is not. So another thing I want to ask you about is like the efficacy of like AEO graders and a lot of these traditional SEO tools. Like one of the things I'm seeing a lot is like the traditional SEO tools are putting out AEO graders and giving scores to stuff. And, you know, I mentioned in our last conversation, we're huge fans of Profound as a measurement tool, and that's our measurement partner of choice for our agency. But when I look at some of the traditional SEO tools that we pay for, they have AEO tools built in. And I wanted to get your opinion before I sort of color it with my thoughts. But like, what is your opinion on those different AEO graders and how they perform versus one another?
There's a ton of them, right? I mean, I maybe mentioned this to you before, but the data point is I think there's been over 100 AI visibility platforms created in the last 18 months. And those 100 companies have collectively raised like $150 million in VC. That was prior to the most recent news about Profound, which, you know, they raised just a monster round that's equal to that entire figure I just quoted just on its own, right? So so that's real. There's a lot of graders, and it's going to force the marketplace to sort of reckon with like, well, who do I trust, and how do I know that they know what they're doing? And then my other response is, you know, from the AI trust signals point of view, we think we're kind of playing in a different game, right? Where I think I mentioned this before, like AI visibility tools, and I think Profound is one of the leading ones, obviously, are fantastic for advanced diagnostics. They're fantastic for huge enterprises. And I think but in the end, I think they're a scoreboard, right? They're sort of keeping track. And what AI Trust Signals is trying to do is more around coaching the players on the field. What do you need to do to get on the scoreboard? What are the plays that are going to get you to the end zone, right? That are going to get you in position to shoot the 3-pointer. So I think that's just differentiation for AI Trust Signals. I think AI Trust Signals sits somehow underneath or maybe before AI visibility scoring tools, right? So you use it as a way to figure out how to get in the game and score points, and then you can choose a scoreboard to figure out how to score or what your score is, right? How your visibility looks, how often, and maybe the more advanced moves that you need to make. I think that with the rise of vibe coding, I'm not surprised there's 100 companies attacking this marketplace, right? Because
Yeah.
it's an obvious thing. It's super hot in the news cycle. And so I'm not also surprised to see some of these news articles coming out that are saying like, hey, these two graders say I'm terrible, and this one says I'm awesome. And I don't know what, I don't know up from down when it comes to
Yeah.
that. There's no easy answer. I think you have to look closely at and become a student in some ways of like, what is the grading methodology? How are they grading it? What kind of data are they using about you to understand what they claim AI models know about you? How is that? How validated is that? Right? There's a buyer beware market. That's not any different than SEO either, right? I mean, you've built a reputation as a leader in that industry, but that industry is unfortunately rotten with companies that sell SEO services and don't
I think
actually
SEO agency is a
really
four-letter
do
word for a lot
anything.
of people. Definitely. We come across that all the time, especially in our sales conversations where, people don't believe in SEO or AEO because they've been bamboozled by some company who's doing it unethically. And I think one of the things we're seeing a lot right now is a lot of the traditional SEO tools that we use have tried to adjust. And I think this goes back sort of like the copper wires thing of like building on old infrastructure. We see a lot of the SEO tools that we use and have used for many years are trying to adjust and build AEO tools, and pretty universally we've just seen them be subpar compared to those that have just started from scratch with AEO tracking techniques. And that's like, I think one of the things that I always advise our potential customers against is to try and avoid trying to build an AEO program with SEO foundations, whether that be tooling or content or strategy. Like the two can interact and support one another in terms of strategy, but like they have to be fundamentally different, and the tools you use have to be fundamentally different. But
Yeah.
And that's the big thing where we've seen in terms of, especially with tooling, it's just
Yeah.
everybody adjusting to AEO is doing a poor job versus those that just come out straight for the AEO tools.
Let me tell you a funny story. This is a true story. So this was like 2 or 3 months after we launched AI Trust Signals. And we got a customer support ticket from a customer who said, I ran my AI Trust Signals report. I showed it to my SEO agency, and they said it was BS. And those guys are full of it, and none of what's in that report is true. And so we took a look at the report and like kicked the tires on some of the agentic results, did some empirical investigation right outside of our agentic platform, and just went and looked at her website and looked at the code and came back to her and said, you know what, our report is actually right. Like these things are true about your site. Like you do not have schema, you do not have NAP consistency across platforms. Your reviews are localized to Google, and they are therefore not counting in a lot of elements, like a lot of the stuff that you see in AI Trust Signals, right? And so she was stuck, right? Because her agency that she's been paying for years is telling her this is BS, but then I'm coming back to her and telling her like, no, like the tool actually works and it's telling you the truth. So she upgraded her account from the single report monthly to the 3 report monthly, which is our premium tier, right? Which gets you the ability to do more than one company report in AI Trust Signals. And she ran the other 2 reports in her account then on her direct competitors in her local market. And they did significantly better than her in their Trust Signals reporting. And so that started to raise some red flags to her. And the punchline of the story is she wound up taking that collection of 3 AI Trust Signals reports to sort of another SEO professional and saying like, can you help me make sense of this? And that guy basically said, AI Trust Signals is telling you the truth. Your SEO agency has been lying to you for years about all the work that they were doing about optimizing your site. And the AI Trust Signals report just brought it to the surface, and she fired the SEO agency, and we helped her find her way to a more reliable partner. But I think so I think there's a risk. I think there's a risk in the AI visibility marketplace of that same kind of stuff being true right now. That like if you wanted to, you and I could sit down in front of Claude Code, and over the weekend we could get to a reasonably good like AI visibility checker. You know, the first version of AI Trust Signals was I built in N8N.
Yeah.
14 months ago. So that's possible, and you got to be on the watch out for that. There's a huge difference, though, between those vibe coded and sort of end-to-end do-it-yourself solutions
Mm-hmm.
and the enterprise grade stuff and the investment that's going into the enterprise grade stuff. AI trust signals are profound or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I also think there's generally like in the AEO give you a score from 0 to 100. Checkers that I have from some of the traditional SEO tools that we have, they're just they're not helping you understand like what the next steps are, the way that AI trust signals are, and they're not actually tracking, in real time you know, all of your AEO metrics that you want to be tracking in terms of share of voice, giving you examples of prompt query fanouts that are coming out of the prompts to help you understand where to optimize and those types of things. So it's all just sort of
Yeah.
like they're dipping the toes in the water and trying to use traditional infrastructure that's built, and it's not doing its job effectively at accomplishing either end of like the two tools that we use regularly on all of our
Yeah.
AEO
Yeah.
programs. Yeah. So I think it's like, yeah, it's not great. I don't know. But I think like you also touched on a thing that's like it's really interesting to hear you talk about that client's experience with their agency, because it's unfortunately not wholly uncommon. It's something that we see a lot, and I
Yeah.
think now it's actually getting easier to identify when those situations are happening, and rectify them. Whereas like previously, you just had to sort of a lot of people just believe what they were told, and you had to choose who you were
Didn't
going to
know.
listen to.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's sort of like having a good mechanic. Like when you find a good mechanic, you stick with them for a long time, and that's been like one of the big benefits for us as an agency is when people find us and build that trust, they end up being clients like 3 or 4 times over the course of the next few years of their career, right? Like
Yeah. Right.
that's been how we've grown our business.
Yeah. And a good business it is.
Well, amazing. I want to ask you sort of one last question.
Yeah.
How do you view sort of like attribution and success on LLMs? Just given that a lot of people are not necessarily like clicking through, like how do you determine what success looks like, and how do you bake that into the AI trust signal system to help people understand like what good looks like you did in this instance?
Yeah. The how can I answer that? We don't really, right? So we have our own trust signal score. We're not
Hmm.
measuring your AI visibility. We are measuring a brand's success with the creation of information that is likely to result in AI citation and AI
Hmm.
recommendation, right? So we're grading. Our checker isn't checking your AI visibility. That's not when you get a
Yeah.
trust signal score. You're not. That's not a visibility score in the way that Profound is going to give it to you. What our score is telling you is out of this set of proprietary signals, right? Pieces of behaviors of your company's brand and information. How well are you doing at being good at them, right? And
Hmm.
that's what the trust signal score is. And so, in that way, it's self contained. We fully admit, and we get this criticism when people go measure their brand in AI trust signals and they go do work, their score goes up 5, 10, 15 points. They come back and they say, how do I know it's not just you turning the dial behind the scenes and like making my trust signal look better? And my answer to that is, you don't. Like, you have to
Hmm.
trust me that we're not doing that. We're in the trust business. Marcus Sheridan has built his whole career and reputation on, radical transparency and radical candor. So we're not doing that. But this is why when we work with agencies like yours, our formula for case studies is, yeah, we want to see your trust signals score increase, but we want to measure the impact of that in something else. We want to use Profound to actually understand how is it impacting citations and rankings. So that's part of it, right? Is I don't think there's an all-in-one tool that's going to
Yeah.
get you where you need to go. And I'm biased, and I think it's AI trust signals plus something else,
Hmm.
a scoreboard, an AI visibility tracker, combined with AI trust signals can be the toolkit that gets you towards growth and success, right?
Yeah.
On the attribution side, I also think that's a huge opportunity that I haven't seen anyone really crack yet. Everyone's focused on sort of how do I show up in ChatGPT. No one so far has done a great job in figuring out how do I attribute this lead to AI. Certainly the AI platforms are not helping because they're not sharing nearly enough data with us, at least at the level that we're used to in the SEO world. So I've been advising clients to implement kind of very brutalist, blunt instrument type methods for that. One of them is when people are on a website filling out a lead form for contact me or book a demo or something like that, I'm literally asking my clients to add a checkbox field to that form that says, did you hear about us from AI, yes or no?
Yeah.
Or did you search us on AI, yes or no? Right? Because since there is zero click, we don't have a clean attribution path. So we have to make some assumptions like, if you see your direct brand URL traffic increasing, probably the increase is attributable to AI, but there's no data line to connect those. I think we're at the point where you sort of just have to ask at the moment until the data rails get built between the LLMs and the websites via cookies or some other kind of like pervasive tracking tool. We don't have pixels, we have nothing, right?
Yeah.
So the only thing we can do is just ask the customer, when they fill out the lead form or when they reply to the email or when they sign up for the webinar, did you research us with AI? Did AI recommend us, right? And there's a million ways to sort of test that question. But I think we literally have to ask, and that's your cleanest attribution that we can do right now. I don't know. How are you doing it?
I think that's interesting. Just a single like binary, did you find us through AI or not kind of question to make it easier. We've really been encouraging a lot of our clients and in our own lead form are asking like how you found us and using that as a part of it. And we use a sort of like triangulation method where we look at, total AI prompt volume that you're showing up for, citations, invisibility, share of voice, and just like the general measurement of those sort of top of funnel metrics. And then also GA traffic from LLMs, because there obviously is still some, even though a lot of it is coming through just like general visibility and then you copy paste into a branded search or go direct, right? So like those two things, and then the third one being sort of a post-conversion survey or something like that can be more like qualitative and self-identifying to be able to understand. So I think the interesting thing, I've actually always been a fan of that model also, just because like even if you saw an ad and your last click was on a Facebook ad, but like what first got you to my website was, a post on LinkedIn or something like that. And the thing that you remember might be that LinkedIn post, and that might be the thing that like influenced you. I think those post-conversion surveys are really effective at helping sort of surface like what is actually top of mind when you're making the conversion. And I think that oftentimes is really interesting anyway, like even if it's not AI related, I think that's a really interesting data point to collect.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I think with AI, it's just like all the more powerful now because there is this sort of, the waters are a little bit muddy in terms of attribution.
Yeah.
So yeah, we definitely recommend the same, but I really like the approach of just binary. Did you look for us on AI or not?
Yeah.
As a really quick sort of...
And look, I'm guilty of this, right? Like how many times have you been filling out a form or like completing a shopping cart and they're like, how'd you hear about us? And then they give you a list of like 15 attribution sources, right? And it's like, well, I mean, I did see you on Instagram, but I also saw you on TikTok. And I also so I either just like pick one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think it's effective. If we're trying to get to the answer for AI where we already know the attribution picture is murky, just adding ChatGPT to your list of like, how'd you hear about us? It probably isn't going to get you there. And that's why I've been advising clients, like, I think you have to be explicit. I think you can keep your how did you hear about us menu, but asking the question, like, did you research us with AI or did AI inform your decision? Something like super explicit like that in order to get to the data, again, until we have the rails built.
Well, and I also just think anytime you have a survey, like you're going to get a higher likelihood of somebody filling out a survey that's really straightforward versus something that has 15 options that you have to think about. I think the biggest thing that happens to me is whenever I get those surveys, like if I'm not in the right mood, I'm like very rarely, like I don't always fill out those surveys. You know what I mean? Like I just move off of it.
Right. Yep.
And usually and we see that actually in our lead form too, is like, I get also one of the first questions I ask is like, so wait, how did you actually find out about us? You know what I mean? Because you didn't fill that in. I'm always curious.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's an area where I think we're going to see like the biggest expansion in AI search tech is going to be Like that's like the third category that we're not talking about is like where is the attribution going to come from and how is it going to come about? I think it'll
Yeah.
be interesting to see.
Yep. I think you're right. You know they're going to charge us for it, by the way. You
Yeah,
know
I'm
it.
sure. They all got to make money somehow. It's like we've got to figure it out. I want to ask also like one follow up question to your answer for the first part of that answer is like
Yeah.
you're building a scorecard. AI Trust Signals is not you're not a scorecard, but a coaching model about like here are the things that you need to do. Here's how you're objectively performing on these base measures that should suggest success for AI search. How often are you updating those trust signals and making changes? And like how
Good
are you going
question.
about making those changes?
All the time, right? So a little peek under the hood. The way that AI Trust Signals works is for the user, you give us your brand site URL, and then you wait, right?
Mm-hmm.
While you're waiting, though, what happens is there's this huge data and workflow pipeline that orchestrates 60 different independent functioning AI agents. So you can picture it simply as like each trust signal has its investigator agent that's going to take your website. First of all, we investigate your website. So we figure out what kind of company are you, where are you located, how can we assign a category or a vertical industry to you or something like this. It gathers information. Then it feeds that to our 19 investigator agents. Those agents go and specifically on a trust signal by trust signal basis ask each of 3 LLMs about that trust signal about your business. They haul that verbatim information back from those AI models. That goes into then our scoring assessment agent library, which is a whole other set of 19 agents that are analyzing the outputs from the LLMs. They're analyzing the results, they're normalizing them across the 3 AIs and scoring the signal. Then we have another set of agents that go and tabulate signal scores by tier. Then we have the final all summation agent score that's all up. And then we have the Marcus AI agent that goes and does the analysis and the action plan and the recommendations on top of it, right? So it's behind the scenes, it's like super complicated. I'm always impressed when we run an AI Trust Signals report because I know what's going on behind the scenes and you click go and then 3 minutes later it comes back. And
Mm-hmm.
like that's a lot in 3 minutes. It's like fascinating to me. The answer to your question is we're always tinkering with the prompts inside each of those agents. And we know they're not perfect. Our users tell us they're not perfect. Something interesting recently we uncovered is we had a lot of our clients coming back and kind of complaining to us like, hey, I have schema on my website and like it's validated with schema.org. I have it, but you're giving me a fail on advanced schema deployment on my website. And we were like, that's really weird. What's going on with that? And as we investigated it, we uncovered that only 1 out of the 3 frontier LLMs can actually see injected schema on pages. Injected schema meaning schema that's placed by a third party like Yoast or HubSpot or a plugin or some service that provides schema for you. Claude and ChatGPT can't see that schema at all. Google can see it, and it's probably because Google is integrated with their search capability to an
Mm-hmm.
extent that Gemini can read any type of schema on any page.
Interesting.
Our trust signal, though, is designed around the idea that you have to get 3 positives from 3 different LLMs in order to get a pass on
Yeah.
advanced schema. And so a lot of our schema users, or a lot of our users were getting a fail on schema, but it wasn't their fault. It's that actually Claude and ChatGPT can't read it because it's injected schema from a third-party service.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that causes us to go back and relook at that agent prompt and say, okay, is there a way that we could trigger a different kind of web search in Claude or in ChatGPT that would at least try to detect where it could be that schema is being injected, even if we can't see the schema? Is that possible, right? Or should we just pivot the scoring based on if Gemini gets a good signal, we'll believe Gemini and we'll sort of ignore Claude and ChatGPT for this one, right? We're tinkering with that stuff all the time. And we're in the process of scoping a pretty big product improvement, which we're hoping to be able to ship in the early part of summer, which I think is going to be a massive evolution on what is in AI Trust Signals today in terms of its accuracy when it comes to some of this more technical, empirical type stuff, and what we're able to do with that and surface to the user in an actionable way. All the time. We're always messing with it all the time.
Yeah.
Have to be, because the models are always changing anyway.
Yeah, I think that's why I was asking is like the models are changing so quickly that it just seems like you have to be acting really quickly on your end too. And that's one of the things we can see in measurement too is with our clients. I think one of the things that's also interesting about the difference between traditional search and AI search is just once you got to the first page of Google, like you're pretty set for a while, you know what I mean?
Right.
And with AI search, because it's not as straightforward, you still have to be consistently optimizing around how to stay top of mind for those users because
Right.
everything changes so much. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Look, we have clients come back to us and say, like, well, wait a minute, my score went up the first month. I made all these changes. My score went up 8 points, 10 points. And then in month three, it went down.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, yeah, it's probabilistic. It's gonna vary based on when you take the snapshot. But then also, maybe it has nothing to do with you. Maybe your competitor also is using AI trust signals and they launched a really successful semantic content program that now AI prefers their information to yours, right? Like that's equally possible. See, it's not just a set it and forget. It's never going to be set it and forget it.
No, I think that's exactly it. And I think that's what's kind of exciting about being in the AEO world. That's the thing that always like excited me about digital marketing in general is just that there is no like you can't just become an expert and be like, well, I'm done. You know what I mean? Like you have to keep
Right.
working at your crafts and getting better every day. So I think that's what's really
Right.
exciting about it all. So this has been an amazing conversation though. Thanks again
Yeah.
for joining me. And we should definitely like check in again in 3 to 6 months and do it again.
Let's do it. Thanks for having me.